Hello, National Six League, and welcome back with our champion, our 2015 National Six League champion, Mr. Kurtain. Kind enough to join us. What an emotional ride it's been.
Feels good.
But champion sitting next to me. You guys know me by now. I had about the opposite season of Kurt. But we got the victory music here. It was a run for the ages from the Steel Curtain. We're going to cover the season in review for the Steel Curtain, kind of how it started. Take the journey with you, if you will. Recap the championship matchup. Also, we'll quickly touch on the third place game as well. But today, Kurt, it's all about you, buddy. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
How does it feel?
It feels really good. When you have a $100 buy-in and you beginning of the season, you don't know what's going to happen.
Go ahead and hold up your.
A lot of things happen in the fantasy football season.
This is our league trophy right here.
13 weeks, a couple playoff games.
There it is, the league trophy.
I'm glad you gave me a couple hundos, instead of all the 20s.
Yeah, that would have been a thick hand over there if I was straight 20s. But it couldn't have happened to a better person. Obviously, seeing you
first year in the league, yeah. I didn't know what to expect going into this league this year. I've been doing fantasy for almost 10 years now, I think, and that Steel Curtain name, you guys really like that name, and I think I came up with it in 2005, and I just went with it, man. It seemed catchy. Not a lot of people really said anything until this year. You guys actually, liked it. And,
we definitely appreciate a good name here, and I'm glad that you mentioned that this was your first year in this league. I don't know if you know this, but this was only our second year together.
Okay.
And everybody returned from last season except for my dad.
Maybe I owe him a tip there. Getting this slot opening up.
He has enough. So my dad and I, as I've mentioned on these airwaves before, ended up joining a league with an $800 buy-in. So he said that's more than enough for him. The spot opened up. I know you had mentioned interest. You had been in the Fantasy Hockey League last year. You had mentioned interest in joining the Fantasy Football League. So we were happy to have you and for you to make this impression with this championship victory year one.
I'll be back next year if I get invited.
If you win 2 years in a row, then you may not be getting a text for year three. But
I know Boss was a little sour that he didn't get in there, but we'll see how it opens up.
I'm glad you mentioned. The thing about Boss is, I've offered it when the league started. He was one of my first texts out there. Do you want to join? He said, "No, I'm already in a couple leagues. Thanks." Then when he saw how my league kind of runs and we do the podcasts and we have a bit of fun over here, then all of a sudden he wanted in. But it's a tough ticket. Kurt jumped on his opportunity, and here he is.
Big fan of fantasy football.
Yeah, he's laughing his way to the bank. I should also mention that this isn't your only championship.
No, I did. I'm in 3 leagues this year for football. I won 2 of them. The other one I think I was 4-9. Just a horrible. I went all in on Andrew Luck. Drafted him first overall. Man, but you got to make a note though. 6 points for a passing touchdown in that league.
All right.
So I was thinking, Luck had a great year last year. If he would have had 80% of the year he had last year,
he would have been right up there.
I would have been sitting nice. And a lot of the players, I had AJ Green, Emmanuel Sanders. A lot of guys that in a PPR league too. That would have been really good, but it just didn't turn out. I ended up getting Blake Bortles in that league. It helped me, but not enough.
Too little, too late.
Not enough. No.
We often talk about how hard it is to win a fantasy championship, how it takes so many different variables coming together. The health of your players, the way that you draft, your waiver wire acquisitions, trades throughout the year. I know you made at least one that turned out to be a big boost for you.
It didn't really help me as much. I know you guys were talking about that last podcast.
You would know better than us.
The Charkantrick West trade, honestly, I go back and forth. I look at trades of what I could do, how you can better the league and yourself. And looking at Robbie's team, he was the only one that really, needed a receiver. And I had a lot of receivers that I never used. I hate being in the situation. You talked about it last podcast. You have a lot of depth on your bench, and who do you pick? And then you beat yourself up over who to pick, which I did in the playoffs, and I just happened to pick the right way. The Charkantrick West trade, though, I knew he was going to be a stud. I was like, okay, we'll see what Robbie's playing with. I threw him Allen Hurns, really surprised. I mean, I honestly felt bad when he initially accepted it. I was thinking he would say no way, or can we think somebody else? But Allen Hurns, I mean, it wasn't like it was a bad trade, but I would say I felt better getting Charkantrick than he would have getting Allen Hurns. But you got Allen Robinson and you got Allen Hurns on the same team. Both guys getting a lot of passes. That Blake Bortles connection, like I said, is big. It was a good year for Jacksonville, but that trade was good. But if you look at the games, it didn't really make much of a difference. It kind of boosted me for a few weeks, but with that Ware coming in and taking some of his carries down the stretch, I was almost not going to start Charkantrick in the playoffs, and I did, and it worked. But yeah, it was a good trade. I mean, I'll say it helped me. I felt good about it because it did give me a couple good weeks of confidence.
Right. So. And I said it on the last podcast. Johnny Zaleski's reaction to that trade.
Yeah.
Almost weekly, I'd get a text from him saying that won you the championship. He said it the second you made it. He continued to remind me. At first, I didn't even know who the guy was. I kept saying, who is this guy?
Nobody did. I couldn't even say his name. I didn't even know. I didn't even know his name was.
Yeah. So just funny that John was that adamant about it, and then it ends up playing out that way. But
yeah, that's right.
So many things coming together for you. You do mention Robbie Wright was part of that deal, and unfortunately for him, and we're going to quickly jump over to this matchup, he came up just short in the winner's consolation game, which was actually the number 4 seed versus the number 6 seed. There's that whole bracket for the teams that lose, and then, or I don't. How does it even work? You probably know better than I do.
Well, the way, I mean, he got that first round. I don't know who he played in the first round.
So they each won their first round games.
Yeah, they each won their first round games, and they play me and Chad, and then
they lose those, but then they have a chance.
Then they have a chance to win that, and then everybody else. Pretty much, if you don't make it in the top 6, your year's done unless you don't want to finish in last and by the draft board.
Right, exactly.
Which was, if we're going by record, I mean, Austin had it locked up for a couple weeks.
Right, and we do it by record. But if you also look at points for, he is in distant last place.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's hard to incentivize the last place person if they get in a situation. I mean, he was 0 and whatever. 2 wins is a rough year. I mean, if you look at his team though, he didn't really have a bad team. I didn't feel like I feel like he had the bad short end of the stick. Maybe Marshawn Lynch was good, but. Ravita, that's fine. That's a good year for to rebuild next year, and if he wants to do the league, I mean, who knows where he's going to be if he's going to even do the league next year.
Yeah, it's a good question. He's also, we should note, has kind of checked out of the fantasy hockey league. I don't know if you've picked up on this. Okay. Lineups have not been set every night.
Yeah, I don't look at everybody's lineup.
This is a guy that prided himself on his fantasy hockey.
We know he's alive though, right? We know he's alive and well. He's okay.
I can't confirm that that's the case, but presumably.
I'd like to have him back next year in the league. I mean, it was good with the podcasts, and got to bounce back from a 2-11 year.
Absolutely, sure. And that's the beauty of this league. Since it's not a keeper league, you get a totally fresh start next year, and I love that. I definitely like that element of things. Draft day, we call it Christmas morning. You get a whole new slate of guys. There's nothing better.
That was my only live draft this year, and out of the 3 that I did, and it makes it so much more fun to see people and be there when you're drafting picks.
Right, and there's no doubt. And I mentioned this again in the last podcast. We're going to do everything we can to get as much of a live draft as we can get going next year.
Yeah,
we'll work out. Whoever can't make it, we'll make sure we get everybody's picks in and have it run as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, I'll be fine on a weekend. I mean, even during the week sometimes.
But anyway, jumping back to it as we kind of got away from it a little bit, this third place matchup, talked about it, broke it down a little bit in the last podcast. It was 130 against the spread, Robbie Wright versus Eric top, Revito bottom, Rod Kern. The winner got their money back, so $100, and Mr. Alfred Kern ran away with this game. The final score 126-83. Kurt and I were looking over the matchup before, and we're not going to spend too much time on it, but we did see
a big week, though. A big week for Rod's team. And if you look at that would have beat me, and that would have beat Chad.
And Rod did say that. He said, had I been in the championship this week.
But when people say that, you have to get it done on the week that you have to get it done.
Right. And that's exactly right.
And it didn't happen, but it is good And that's what makes fantasy football playoffs so exciting because anything can happen.
That's exactly right. I should mention, as we were looking over this, we saw that Rod did start Alshon Jeffrey despite Jeffrey being inactive for the game. Fortunately for him, with $100 on the line, it didn't come back to bite him.
I mean, he could have been over 140 for the points, but yeah, it didn't. Robbie's team, couple softer weeks. You got to get over 100. I think is what a good number in our league this year was. If you made it over 100, you had a good game. But then some people I think on the league high, the score this year might have been in the 150s. Chad had that a couple of times. But yeah, it's a third place matchup that has some meaning, and Rod's going to walk home with his money back. So.
Absolutely, and congratulations to Rod. A nice season. Again, we gave him a lot of grief at the draft.
It was an interesting draft.
He was present, but he wasn't really present. But hey, maybe some of us need to take a page out of Rod's book next year.
If you take the stress out of it like he did, he went with the Miami Dolphins stack. He had a lot of Dolphins. I mean, I had Lamar Miller, and that was if he was available for him, I think that would have been his draft pick. But the AP, he had Adrian Peterson, right?
He did, yeah, absolutely. So that's that matchup. Congratulations to Rod on the win. You'll certainly take third place, $100 home. But let's jump over now to your season in review. Let's start with your draft. Just some thoughts off the top of your head. What were some of your strengths in the draft? Maybe a pick you'd like to have back. But for the most part, what picks kind of carried you, as you feel, to this championship?
Well, I was really confident in my second pick. Julio Jones was like the player that I wanted on my team. I told you this before I texted you because when Ravito was giving me crap for having a subpar team like a few weeks in, and I told you Julio, when he came to me in the second round and he was still available, that was my no doubt draft pick. My first round pick being Forte, I was kind of stuck at that point. I drafted 8th overall, and I'm really glad I didn't draft C.J. Anderson.
Yes.
I never wanted to draft C.J. Anderson. It never crossed my mind. So Matt Forte, I've had him in a couple leagues in the past. I love the guy. I mean, he's a guy that's fun to watch. They're going to throw to him. That was my first overall pick. I liked his year. He got hurt, and then I'll tell you what. Next year, Jeremy Langford is going to be their guy.
He's a nice player.
I was fortunate to pick him up off of waivers in a couple other leagues, but I liked that Matt Forte, Julio Jones, back to back there, and then my third pick overall, I think, was Lamar Miller, and then I picked Emmanuel Sanders 4th. So those first 4 picks, I wasn't too sure of Lamar Miller this year, but I had him in all 3 of my leagues, and he did pan out. He had a slow start, like you guys talked about before. So my first 4 picks, I was feeling really good, man. I mean, I was pumped up. Disappointed in Travis Kelce this year. It didn't cost me, but if you look at the tight end pool, I mean, if you didn't have Gronk, you were pretty much Gronk and Greg Olsen. You were just kind of flying people.
Right, yeah. It was those two, then it was everybody else.
You were just kind of week to week seeing what happened. You had a couple guys like Eifert come in there and Benjamin Watson. A couple guys had good weeks, but Kelce, I couldn't get away from him. I had to because he's such a threat on that team. So I just think about the year. I know I won the league, but I mean Travis Kelce could have had 15 points every week. I mean he finished in the top 10 I think for tight ends, but that's not saying much.
I want to take a look at it now. He finished number 7 overall, so pretty solid. He did get you 10.3 points in championship week.
And he was due, like Robbie said.
Right. Exactly
yeah.
right. That was the thing. Preseason, every fantasy expert was high on Travis Kelce.
I was so excited that I got him.
I was eyeing up Jimmy Graham from the start. A lot of experts were warning you to stay away from him. I didn't listen. Didn't really work out. But a lot of people were putting Travis Kelce above him, kind of as a second option at tight end, right behind Gronk. Didn't necessarily meet the expectations, but also didn't kill you either. He gave you some consistent production. That's all you can really ask for.
Yeah, tight ends didn't kill you this year, so I was okay with that. I mean, I can't say anything because, like I said, I won. I was fortunate enough to win, but I would say quarterback-wise, I was all in on the Matty Ice to Julio Jones all year. And it just didn't happen this year. I don't know what happened to Matt Ryan. It started
off hot, if I recall.
He had a couple good weeks, but I'll tell you what, those Falcons, I mean, if you remember, they were undefeated, I think, into week 7.
5-0, maybe 6-0. Yeah.
I mean, I was really looking forward to having Matt Ryan. I thought going after the draft, I was like, I really like my team, and I think I have a good shot to be in the middle of this. And if they can put good weeks together, it'll be great. But
Right.
you look at Chad's team and Cam Newton. I loved the guy last year and a couple years ago. I think this is his 4th year in the league, maybe. I mean, one of his first 2 years, I had him, and I loved the guy. Everybody was like, "Oh, he's not going to be a good NFL quarterback." And this year, I was like, "I'm staying away from Cam Newton. I don't want it." I called him Scam Newton, basically. I didn't want to draft him. I didn't want him on my team. I wasn't even thinking about it. I don't know what pick he had him, but I think a lot of people passed him up.
Well, let me say this because I do know this. We've looked at this before. John Zaleski drafted him, dropped him, and Chad was able to pick him up off of the waiver wire. Cam Newton was drafted 93 overall in the 8th round by Ticklesome Ivory. He was dropped less than a month later and was only on the waiver wire for 1 week before Chad added him for $51 auction dollars. And
that's painful. I didn't
maybe the
that.
Pickup of the year.
I would say it's pick of the year. I mean,
because
honestly, I'm going to admit that I didn't even think I had a chance in the championship game until I saw. I mean, that Odell Beckham news. That was like, okay, I got a chance because I'm serious. I wasn't thinking. I mean, I knew Gurley had Seattle, but I'm thinking, okay, Cam Newton's going to just torch Atlanta again. Panthers D could get a few picks. I mean, they could put up 20 points themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It was just so much stuff can happen in fantasy football, and it did. And that's how. My draft overall, like I know we're getting away from the draft a little bit, but I was happy, like I said, going through the draft and thinking about my picks. Just the quarterback situation, I wish would have turned out a little bit differently. Next year, though, I think I'm going to go with the same strategy. I'm going to try to get a top running back, wide receiver. It depends if we're talking about PPR, possibly half point, full point.
Which would obviously change the dynamic.
Yeah, that's because you got more running backs coming into
and
play.
real quickly, we'll digress. We were talking about it just before. I'm starting to warm up to the idea of a half-point PPR. We were saying that we did vote on this. The league voted on this preseason, and I think the votes were 7-5.
It was close.
Saying no PPR. We're going to run that by next season, see if we can get it through. Just changes the dynamics a little bit, and as you were saying, brings in
more players.
Some more players, yeah.
I think a full point's too much, but a half point, we'll see what everybody thinks. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's just something to think about. It adds a new element to how you draft and how the season goes. But
yeah, I know. I'd absolutely agree with that. So, coming out of the draft into the season, if my memory serves me correct, you started off hot out of the gate.
Well, I wanted to mention one thing.
Sure.
For drafting early, Colin Fawcett, rough fantasy year for him in football and hockey, but he had Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger. Now in the draft, I was going to go with Ben Roethlisberger, and he took him, and that's when I took Matt Ryan. And he took Phillip Rivers, I forget what round, but he dropped Phillip Rivers prior to the week 1, and I saw that, and I was like, I'll just throw him on my bench. I need a backup quarterback. So I had Rivers sitting on my bench for a while, and he ended up. I think that's kind of the person that made me maybe have a chance to win the championship because he dropped him. He dropped him prior to the season, and I was like, no way. But he was the guy that drafted Jordy Nelson. He needed to. I forget,
right.
And somebody else got hurt too. Roethlisberger was hurt. That's what it was. Roethlisberger got hurt or something, or was questionable to start week 1.
Right. Yeah. There was
all
kind of
he had to drop. I don't know. He had to do something. There was something happening, but I appreciate Colin dropping Phillip Rivers. I didn't use him until week 7, I think, but I'd still help me out.
Yeah. As Matt Ryan started cooling off, you were able to put in Rivers to get the job done.
Yeah, I did start off 7-0, but then I lost before the 6 last games there, so that was.
Yeah, so as I'm looking at it, you finished the year 9-4, second overall in the standings, only behind Chad Zaleski, Aces Deuces Lounge. Chad finished the year 11-2 with 7 consecutive victories. And I know you weren't in the league last year, but I'm sure by now you've heard Chad, the reigning champion, and we're starting to think, here we go again. And to your credit, I had said all year long. First off, well, for one, I'll give myself the credit. I stood up for you whenever Ravito was saying his team's not that good. I said, well, you look at some of these players, it is pretty good. But I'd always said on paper, Chad's the team to beat. I was proven wrong, although Chad does get away with a couple of minor excuses here.
I do respect that. Like I said, I didn't have any confidence that I would win the championship.
So we'll kind of skip through to the championship now. We'll actually get into this game real briefly. We mentioned in the last podcast, Odell Beckham, you already mentioned it today, suspended. Amari Cooper got injured, I think, about halfway through the Thursday night game, so we knew going in.
Yeah, he had a bad foot going in. I mean, he was banged up.
So he only had 1 point, which, if you have Amari Cooper, with the year he's had, you're banking on him to do something big.
Yeah.
And so going in, we knew he was handicapped also with Tyler Eifert out.
That was big, too.
That was a staple of the Ace Deuce Lounge lineup.
Taking a close look at that, too, because I wasn't sure if he was, out, questionable, was going to play. That's a big hit, too. I mean, Benjamin Watson wasn't really consistent this year.
So actually breaking down the matchup here in recap, we'll start with the quarterbacks. And who would ever thought here in the championship game it would be Ryan Fitzpatrick outscoring Cam Newton pretty handily, 23-14. I know you listened to our last podcast. You heard us high on Fitzpatrick because we said that game was rigged, and it was. First off, did you see the coin toss in that game?
I actually didn't watch much of that game. I was big on the Steelers game. My thing with Fitzpatrick, though, I had Matt Ryan, which I dropped. And I actually started Tyrod Taylor in the semifinals because I liked it. I was going with the Sammy Watkins, Tyrod Taylor.
So it's nice to have that connection.
That's how I did this week. I went with Fitzpatrick and Decker. I looked at the waiver wire. Fitzpatrick's got a good matchup. I know it's against the Patriots, but they're going to throw a lot. And if they're down, they're going to throw. And Fitzpatrick's had a pretty good year, but yeah, that game I didn't really watch any of it. But I remember checking, because I was avidly checking this the whole day, obviously. I was actually in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, watched all of the Steelers-Ravens game. That game's over. I'm flipping through my phone. I'm like, okay, this game's going to overtime. Maybe I can get – I said it. I was like, a Fitzpatrick to Decker touchdown. That's a 10-point swing that could really help me out. I was like, that would be awesome. I didn't see the play happen live. I didn't watch it. I'm checking my phone. I'm getting ready to leave my grandma's house to head back to Pittsburgh. I'm looking at my phone. I turned around to my girlfriend. I'm like, it's happened. Like, Fitzpatrick to Decker. It happened. And she's like looking at me like she knew that I'm like going to have a chance to win $800 or whatever. But that was an exciting moment on Sunday when I saw that happen. And it's a 10, 11-point, 12-point swing, however many. It was like a 6-yard pass or something.
Right.
So it wasn't. But that was a huge moment on Sunday. So I didn't see the coin toss.
Did you hear about it?
I did hear about it. I heard they're potentially they threw the game maybe to not play the Steelers in the playoffs. Heard a bunch of things about it. Listening to the fan this week. What did you get on that? Did you see it? I didn't see it. So I don't know.
Well, what happened was the coin was flipped. New England wins the toss. And in overtime, with the way the rules are set up, you always receive the kick. Mm-hmm. The guy said, "We'll kick off."
Okay.
And then it seemed like he wanted to backtrack and say, "No, I didn't mean that. We want to receive."
Gotcha.
The ref didn't. He was like, "That's no." He's like, "You said you're kicking the ball. That's how it's going to be." He asked the Jets which way they wanted to, or he asked the Patriots which way they wanted to kick, and they went on with it. Before you know it, blink of an eye, Jets are running off the field. Game over.
I gotcha.
We knew that was going to be the case, given the low spread of 2.5 for New England. We were not surprised to see that's how the game turned out. It's always funny to see how we get there, the journey, the route that it takes to get there. The NFL always finding new and creative ways to go about it.
Yeah.
Belichick, Brady standing by the guy that
Brady
called
didn't
it,
actually go into the...
Which is a big question. And I know this is a little bit racist.
I did hear that.
But why aren't you sending the more intelligent players out there to make that call?
Well, and that's the thing. You might have to think about it because in a beginning of the game coin toss, in a situation like that, you want to probably kick it first. So he's just all caught up in the game, and he's like, oh, we'll kick it first.
Right, and the Patriots are notoriously known for kicking the ball first.
Yeah, because you want to get the ball at second half, but there's no excuse. I mean, that's a weird situation. You get the vibe from the Patriots the whole year. Weird stuff happens. NFL, you guys bet on football. I don't really bet, so you watch the lines. You know what's fishy and what game should be won, what game should be lost, how much. It's National Fix League.
Yeah, it is.
I do agree with it. I'm a big conspiracy guy in anything.
Yeah, let's make no bones about it. There's plenty of strings being pulled from up top, and they're making sure their little darlings are in the playoffs. Don't be surprised this week when the Steelers get in because the NFL wants their darling, the Pittsburgh Steelers, to be in that final tournament. So there's another one for you guys at home. If you're looking to place a wager, go with the Steelers, go against the New York Football Jets, and then enjoy a nice dinner maybe out with a girlfriend later that evening. But digressing a little bit here from the matchup, we'll jump back into it. So Fitzpatrick outscores Newton. That was huge for you. We were giving Newton the edge in that matchup. Then you get down to the running backs, Forte, 7-7, and for you, Lamar Miller as well, 12-7. So especially Lamar Miller, that's a solid outing, and you'll take that all day. For Chad Gurley and James White, pretty similar production. Gurley did have a nice day against Seattle, despite the tough matchup. 15 points for Gurley, 9 for James White. So more or less a wash there, a slight advantage for
Chad,
Aces Deuces Lounge, but nothing that's really separating him in this matchup. And then you jump down to wide receivers, and this was the big one. This is really where you won. And, on paper, coming in, or at least a week before, you would have thought this is where Chad has the opportunity to separate.
Love that Brown against the Baltimore.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking, too.
But it wasn't the case. You had Julio Jones, who had a monster day, and how about that touchdown catch by him? Are you kidding me? He went up, got it, and just ran.
I gotta be honest, I didn't watch any of that game. I didn't see any of the highlights.
So you have
to go back. I have to go back and watch it. He's fun to watch.
Man.
I did. He's probably my favorite player in the NFL, even more than Brown. I mean, he's just a stud all around. I might actually buy a jersey since I won. He won me. He's my player this year. He was the only guy that I never took out except for his bye week.
I'm a Julio guy as well. So I won my first year, and I always talk about this.
Yeah, Matt Ryan.
Away from it, yeah. I won with those Falcons players. Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Tony Gonzalez. So I instantly became a Falcons fan because I'm like, this is awesome.
Oh, yeah, having Tony Gonzalez, too.
Yeah, he was a beast. Even in his final years there, he was awesome. But Julio, man, what a talent. Please go back and watch that touchdown catch because it's beast. So he had 23.8 for you, Eric Decker. We talked about the walk-off touchdown for the Jets. Really salvaged his day as he ends with 10.7. That was huge for you.
Yeah, 10-point swing, especially with the late games with Gurley and who else was in the late game? He had Gurley and who else played late Sunday night?
Trying to look up.
Oh, it was Benjamin Watson. It was Benjamin Watson and Gurley that they had left over, and I was up by a lot, but that was still. You just never know. You just never know what's going to happen.
And then so we turn it over to Aces Deuces Lounge's wide receivers. We talked about Amari Cooper, only 1 point. That hurts. And probably the most surprising result from this matchup individually, Antonio Brown, only 6.1 fantasy points against Baltimore. Obviously a disappointing game for the Steelers in general, but man, if you were going to be betting on one guy to come through for you, given the matchup and the track record, it would have been Antonio Brown, and he just wasn't having it this week for Aces Deuces Lounge. So for you there, major separation. You ended up with 33 points from your wide receivers, at least from those two wide receivers. Chad only ending up with 7. That's really where you won the championship. Dropping down to the tight ends, we talked about Travis Kelce, 10.3 points for the Steel Curtain. And Benjamin Watson for Aces Deuces Lounge, only a half a point.
Yeah. You got a guy like Eifert that was hurt. I mean, there's a couple games I think Eifert had at least 2 touchdowns in. There might have been multiple games where he had huge days. So just the time where whatever's going to happen is going to happen with the NFL. You can't control these injuries. You're going to have to just weather the storm. And Chad still had a good crew aboard the ship to weather that storm with, and I was still worried going in, man. Even with Eifert out, I mean, the Antonio Brown was just a baffling thing. Benjamin Watson, I mean, he could have had a good game too. I mean, Breeze has been throwing a ton.
Right.
That's a decently high-scoring game against Jacksonville.
Yeah, almost hard to believe in a game in which the Saints score 38 points that Watson only comes away with a half point. Jumping down to the flex positions, we've talked about Charkandrick West. Not a fantastic week for you, but he did enough, 6.1 fantasy points. And he went up against Bilal Powell, the New York Jets running back, who had 9. So a pretty nice day there from Powell for Aces Deuces Lounge. He picked up 3 points at the flex position, but wasn't enough. And real briefly, dropping down to the defenses, Steelers had to be disappointing for you to get a goose egg.
I went all in with Steelers the last 2 weeks. They were going to be my playoff defense. I was looking at the Bills for a while. Going in later in the year, I was like, who do I want? Who's got the matchups? I want to try to plan ahead because defenses. I'll tell you what. That's probably one regret I have is not maybe being more serious about drafting a defense. I know you had the Seahawks, and that was a huge point getter for you. think that's something next year, depending on how our points are structured. I might try to get a better defense.
And there's usually those top 2 or 3 that you know are going to be solid and consistent throughout the year, and then the rest is kind of, you can play matchups, which I know a lot of people do.
That's what I did this year. And the Steelers didn't work out.
It's just tough to predict. It's really tough. The NFL is so hard to predict. And then so when you're talking about a team, in individual weeks, the defense, are they going to show up? How are they going to be against this offense? It's just really, really tough. So the Steelers don't get you anything. Fortunately for you, though, the Panthers did going up against Atlanta, where we thought the Panthers could have a massive week. They only get 3 points. And finally, for Carolina, this undefeated season, this undefeated stretch comes to an end. Absolutely amazing it went this far. We haven't gotten your thoughts on it. I'd like to hear. Just what do you see out of that team? It's been so good. Obviously, the D's been awesome.
It's just a lot. Look at the roster. Some of the guys they have stepping up for them. It's got to be a combination of the right things going well. I mean, they're not in a soft division. I mean, it's the way Atlanta started this year. It was great, but I like Carolina. I mean, they've always had the players, but Cam Newton's the guy you probably want. I mean, he can run, he can throw. He's a freak almost of nature. I mean, you can't compete with him when he's on his game. But the defense too. I mean, just some of the points they've scored on defense alone. And you got Greg Olsen. You got, I don't even know their receiving core really. Their receiving core is like Ted Ginn's. You got guys that are just stepping up. It's really not. You don't have any like superstar wide receivers in my opinion. Running backs, Jonathan Stewart, and I don't even know who the other
Cameron Artist.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you look at this team. They just win games in multiple ways.
Yeah,
so that's going to end sometime. And the other thing too about Atlanta is they played Atlanta a couple weeks before and they smacked them. It was like 38 or something nothing. But you really think you're going to let this divisional opponent whoop you around 2 times in 3 weeks? It was unlikely, but I was still thinking that they were going to put up. Cam Newton was going to put up 25 points, and their defense put up maybe at least 10, 15, and then it didn't happen. It's 20-13. That if you're talking about fixed games, I mean that's one that you would probably look at. I don't know what the spread was on that game.
The spread on that game was 7 points, which is relatively reasonable. Funny story about that, real quickly. My dad has a female cousin in Dallas, and they like to send bets back and forth to each other. She cannot buy a win right now. She's lost like literally a dozen in a row. And she doesn't really understand the concept of spreads. She just likes to always take these favorites.
Take the winner or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So she texted my dad Sunday morning and was like, I'll take Carolina, you take Atlanta straight up. And my dad was just like, okay, if that's fine, we'll give her a win, we'll throw her a bone. Then Atlanta ends up winning the game, and he was cracking up. So they're just pretty funny to see it play out that way. I know the general public, the betting public, was obviously all over Carolina. You mentioned the previous game being 38-0. A lot of people betting that they could win this game by 8. Not so fast in the National Fixed League. You don't get free money that way. So, and then down to the kickers, the final part of this matchup, you had the Seattle kicker who got you 5 points versus Chad. He had Graham Gano, the Carolina kicker, 8 points. Really not much doing there. The final score in the championship game, the Steel Curtain 99.4, Aces Deuces Lounge 66.3. At what point did you know this is wrapped up? This is it.
Well, like I said, I was coming back from Lancaster to go to Pittsburgh, and I was sitting there in the car. I just kept checking my phone periodically. And I was looking at Todd Gurley. I was like, if he starts out hot, maybe, because my points were, I had Hauschka left, and so I had 93 points. Really, after that Decker Fitzpatrick touchdown in overtime, I was like, okay, I got it unless something crazy happens. But I was like, I'll keep an eye on it. So I would say that Fitzpatrick to Decker was the turning point. But I was still a little nervous because Gurley, okay, he's playing against Seattle, but maybe he's going to get 3 touchdowns. And then Benjamin Watson, Breeze is going to – just some freak – I mean, it could be 3 touchdowns for 10 yards total.
Right.
We'd just have 20 points or something. So I was never like, okay, I know for sure I got it until the second half of the Seattle game. But I felt really good after the Fitzpatrick Decker touchdown.
And it was just funny the way that kind of the scheduling played out, that almost everything was done at 1 and there was just a little bit left at 4. And
I don't think I could have slept Sunday night, man. I mean,
no, that's the worst when it carries over to Monday night.
This year, I think I I've stayed up to watch every Sunday night game. Almost every Monday night game because if my game isn't over until Monday night, I want to know.
Right, absolutely.
And there's a couple of those games. Like when I lost to Rod, I broke my streak when I was 7-0 going to week 8. I played Rod. Emmanuel Sanders had the worst game you could ever have. He had 2 points or something, and all he needed was 2 catches for 20 yards and I win. And he had 2 catches for 15 yards. Just something crazy. If you go back to that week, I lost by 0.3 or something. It was week 8. It was week 8. That was, I was like, okay, I'm 7-0, so whatever. It doesn't matter. Yeah, week 8, 2.2. He needed 2.5.
Oh.
2.5 to tie. 2.6. I was up watching that game. That was a 4:00 game, but that was a chance to go 8-0. I was like, oh, all right, cool. That's gonna happen. But Emmanuel Sanders, man, I sat him the last 2 weeks. I wasn't when Robbie mentioned it when I played against him last week in the semis that Emmanuel Sanders killed him. I didn't even have him in the semis. He had a 26-point game.
And he was on their bench.
He was on bench. Yeah, I sat him. And the Julian Edelman thing, I picked him up in case he came in because he's too big of a name to not have on your bench. But he never got used. But that was a fun championship week. And I got to give it to Chad. I mean, if anybody, I think he probably deserved to win this year. He had the best team on paper. But when it came down to who shows up in week 16 and who's healthy, I got lucky.
Right.
It's a lot of luck. Like you're saying, 60% skill, 40% luck is what Robbie said. I think it's the other way around.
Yeah, you could easily make a case.
It's so hard, but that's what makes it so much fun.
Right. So, you need so much to go right, but when it does, man, I mean, it's like I can even remember winning my championships for a little bit less money, but I could just remember winning and forgetting that there was any money involved. I was just so pumped to win. You put so much time and effort into it. It's just sweet to win. We do want to give Chad credit. You already have. I did just want to say congratulations. Another great season. And
it's tough to do. It's tough to show up 2 years in a row like that.
So he now has, I've handed him, I'll be handing his money, his $300 to him tomorrow night. So that will now be $1,100 I've handed to him in a calendar year, basically.
And he didn't have your brother. He didn't have your brother to split with, right? Didn't he split with your brother?
Very. Oh, that's right. So he did not get $1,100. But interesting, there may be some talks that if Ben had been in this roster this year, maybe Ben helps him get over the hump. So very interesting.
I don't know
point
about
there.
that, but that's
absolutely. I mean, that's definitely not the case. They probably would have missed the playoffs if Ben.
Who was Ben involved with this year?
Robbie Cicchino.
Okay.
They actually had a decent year, I believe, but Ben doesn't know. Ben was checking scores on Sunday, because we were all sitting around watching the games. He was checking scores. He's like, "Oh yeah, being Robbie or winning or whatever." I'm like, "Ben, you know that the season's over. There's a championship game. There's a third place game. You're not in either." And he had no idea. But congratulations to Chad. Another great year. I actually kind of feel bad that we're doing this podcast because I said we would do one for Chad last year. Yeah. You weren't in the league. We didn't end up doing one for Chad. It just never panned out. But we definitely want to give him credit. It's been a great run. And I think a lot of people can look at what Chad's done over the past couple of years and take some stuff away from the good things that Chad's done to help improve their own teams, myself included. It's been a very impressive run for him. But, of course, Mr. Rock, congratulations to you.
Thank you.
I mean, man, it's just you got to love these fantasy sports. I mean, it's funny. At the end of the day, you take a step back and realize it's fantasy, but you kind of get lost in it. It's so much fun.
Oh, yeah.
It makes every game entertaining.
That's why I do it, because you're paying attention to.
You're up late on Monday night.
I wouldn't even know. Yeah, I wouldn't even know what's going on in half these games if I wasn't playing fantasy. Because I watch the Steelers and that's it.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe the Skins or something because I'm in the DC area, but no, it's just the how it plays out from what team you draft to what team you end up with. I mean, some of the guys you look at that you go through and you're like, I was counting on those guys to do well, they didn't. And then, I end up having Ryan Fitzpatrick. If I had to pick who a quarterback I would have week 16, it would have been Matt Ryan or Phillip Rivers. Right. It would have never been. I started Tyrod Taylor and Ryan Fitzpatrick to get me the win. Yeah. And it's like, you got to go with the hot hands in the league. And it was kind of funny because Ravito, I never forget the podcast after week 3 when he was he was busting my chops about having Bilal Powell in, and Chad had him in the championship.
Yeah. Here he is battling, going against you in the championship.
I needed him week.
Having a nice day,
I
too.
needed him week 3 because I think it was Lamar Miller was questionable, and I was like, I can't get a goose egg because I'm waiting for Lamar Miller, so I picked him up. And I remember Ravito's looking at my team. He's like, "Oh, he's got Bilal Powell starting in this."
And it's funny because like you see us sit back and talk about it. We had the 2 worst teams in the league this year.
I didn't take offense to it, but I'm laughing at it because I never forgot that, and now Bilal Powell is playing me in the championship.
Right, so, yeah, and it all kind of comes full circle. And that's what makes this fun. The unpredictability of it all is, you just can't beat it. But as we wrap it up here, we got our music back out. He's been paid out. He's got his trophy.
Thinking about next year.
And he'll be back next year looking to repeat. We'll all be back trying to take the crown off him. Kurt, it's been a pleasure, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
Thanks for joining the league. Congratulations to you. Spend the money wisely. Do you have any plans for this money?
Well, I'm taking a trip to Florida, believe it or not. The girlfriend has a friend getting married. She's a bridesmaid in, so that's going to help a lot.
There you go.
Going to Disney for a day, going to Universal for a day.
So it's like you just won a championship and you're going to Disney, baby.
I didn't really want to spend the money, but it's like we're going to Florida for a wedding. Let's make it a vacation. So
let's end it this way. And we'll be back with you next year for the 2016 season. I'll be in touch with all you guys about the draft and get everything set up. Thank you to everybody playing this year. It was a blast. We made memories.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. But I got to say Big Bill. Bill, a big thank you. Did you tell your dad I won as the guest?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure he wanted to hear that.
Big Bill.
But we're going to end it. This music comes to a close. You're going to say, what are you going to do next? You know what you're going to say? Go to Disney World.
I am going to Disney World. This money, Disney World.